Good day to you. My name is Scott Pick and I'm the CEO and founder of Wealth Migrate. I wanted to share with you some lessons that I've learned. I've been investing internationally for 25 years. I did my first investment in 1999. And obviously in those times, if I told you that in the last 25 years, I'd got every deal right and that I hadn't lost money for myself and or other investors that invested alongside me, I'd either be lying, cheating, or stealing. However, we've done this at scale. We've helped members now in 178 countries, investors from 78 countries, facilitated over $1.3 billion worth of investments on 5 different continents. We've had over $110 million in equity deployed into deals. We've had over $30 million that's been paid out in distributions and exits. And the majority of the deals continue to perform and the distributions are being paid and the capital will be refunded plus capital growth once the deal exits. However, during those 25 years, you don't always get it right. And I want to share with you a couple of lessons that I think are really, really important. So I know I go into this in a huge amount more detail. If you're interested, you can go and look at our different courses and offerings that we've got between Wealth Going Global, etc. But I wanted to run through the due diligence and just to give you a quick update. Now, I'm not giving you financial advice. I'm just giving you my experience of what I've learned in 25 years, having helped investors from all over the world, some of the wealthiest, most sophisticated investors. And over that time, you learn patterns and you watch what works and you watch what doesn't work. And that's what I want to share with you. So this is specifically around how do you find the right partners and how do you do the due diligence. At a high level, I always say that there's 3 golden rules. The first one is that the partner needs at least a 10-year track record in a specific niche. Now, the reason being is that the 10-year track record, most market cycles go in 7 to 10-year cycles. So if they've got 10 years plus, then you can see how they behaved in a down cycle. Anyone can look like a hero in a rising market. How did they behave when the market turned? A specific market niche, well, that's important. You don't want a jack of all trades. You want someone that is specifically focused on one area. And finally, probably the most important one is that they've put their own money into the deal and their money is treated the same way as your money is. And again, why this is important, it's not how they behave when it's working. It's how they behave when it's not working. And if their money's in the deal, then they are going to make sure that they are there, they're aligned with you, and they're going to help find solutions. At the end of the day, things go wrong in investing. It's the way the world works. And you want a partner that helps you work your way through that challenge to find solutions and not someone that is going to run away. So, on the same terms is absolutely vitally important. Where did this all start? Well, back in 2013, I wrote this book, Property Going Global. It was endorsed by Clem Sunter. And ultimately, I got sick and tired of the stats that over 80% of people that invest internationally lose money. So I wrote a book to teach people and I gave them models and, the way to get the right information so that they could make the right decisions. That evolved in the last 10 years into GIDS, the Global Investment Due Diligence System. That's a 10-layered matrix where you look at the macro, you look at the micro, you look at currency, you look at partners, you look at due diligence, etc. And, again, if you go into Wealth Going Global, I can go into this in a lot more detail. We've got GIDS 1.0, which is all around residential, and we've got GIDS 2.0, which is all around commercial. However, with no amount of due diligence are you going to ultimately avoid making mistakes. Like things happen, things like COVID turn up that you don't see coming. Partners don't do what they say they're going to do. And so, from my experience, about 80% of the projects tend to go according to plan and tend to remain on track in terms of the project, projected returns, and kind of 10 to 20% don't go according to plan. And it's one of the reasons why I believe diversification is such an important principle, because no amount of due diligence is going to guarantee success in terms of the process. There's 2 fundamental things that you need, though, to succeed. You need the right information and you need the right partners. And I've got plenty of videos on what happens if you get the wrong information or the wrong partners. But I wanted to share with you a philosophy. Now, this is a really important philosophy. Myself and my co-founder, there were 3 co-founders for us at Wealth Migrate, and myself and the other co-founder, ultimately we fundamentally disagreed on this, and we actually split the company in 2018. And the reason being is that we had 2 different belief systems. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It just is a fact. Okay, so there's 2 different ways to invest. I call it the old school way of investing and the new age way of investing. The old school way of investing is all about control. And the new age way of investing is all about diversification and partnership. Take a building. I don't care whether it's an office building, an industrial building, a medical building, or even a house. What you tend to look at is that you go and borrow from the bank about 60% of the finance. About 30% comes in private equity, and the final 10% comes in equity. Now, in the old school methodology, the investors want to put in 95% of this money. So this equity that's required to do this deal, they want to put in about 95% of this money. And the reason being is that they want all the control. So it's a very old school mindset, but they want all the control. If I put in all the money, I control the deal. The new age way of doing it is you've got 60% bank debt, exactly the same, private equity 30%, and then you've got the equity. But maybe as investors, you only take 10% of the equity. And this is a great example of, you've got a lot less. So you don't have, nearly as much control, but you've got a lot less invested. Now, when you look at risk, the risk is far higher on the old school way of doing it than it is on the new age way of doing it. And why is that? Well, on the old school way of doing it, you've got concentration. You've got all the money invested in one deal. And yeah, sure, you've got all the control, but what about if something goes wrong? So, Kensington is a big hole in the ground, a 5 million Australian dollar hole in the ground in Australia. And now you've got 82 investors from all over the world that have invested. And yeah, great, we've got 95% of the money in, and we've got all the control. But when the shit hits the fan, and I'm sorry to be crude, but it's true, you've got to fix it. And particularly if you're international, that's virtually impossible. Compare that to the new age way of doing it. Now you're diversified. You take your money and your capital and you invest in multiple deals. Sure, you don't have as much control, but now you're dealing with local investors. Would you rather have 95% of all the money from international investors? Or would you rather have 80 or 90% of the money coming from local, sophisticated, high net worth and institutional investors? As an international investor, you're only putting in 10 or 20%. Now, again, it's a different mindset. You're going to have less control, but also because you've got local investors, if something goes wrong, they're going to step in. They're going to help fix the situation, because not only do the regulators protect them, but also they've got an interest to be able to look after it. So it's a very different mindset, because the old school way of doing it's all about control and I'll control. But the problem is when things go wrong, you have to fix them. Whereas the new age way of doing it, partnership and diversification, is that you don't have as much control, but as long as you've got good partners, they're on the ground to be able to assist you. So the old school way is all about being active. The new age way is all about being an armchair. And in simple terms, the old school way is all about scarcity, and the new age way is all about abundance. Now, we fundamentally split on this, and we actually split the company in half. Wealth Migrate, the property team, went off and became Allvest, because all they wanted to do was medical deals in America, and they wanted to have all the control of the deals. From a Wealth Migrate perspective, we wanted to follow the new age model of diversification and partnership to be able to diversify around the world. And I fundamentally believe, not just me, Ray Dalio, who manages $160 billion and has managed to get a return of 21% year on year for the last 40 years, says the most important principle to investment is diversification. You have to diversify across countries, currencies, assets, partners, and time. And so to put that in perspective in terms of real life examples, this deal was Kensington in Australia. And again, the due diligence was all done. The team flew over to Australia. They put all the structures together. They moved all the capital flows. And, but at the end of the day, the investors, 82 of us, I was one of these investors as well, 82 of us invested. And the developer only put in 5% of the capital. And I won't go into all the details, but basically the Chinese government, stopped allowing Chinese people to move money out of the country. Because of that, they lost all their pre-sales. Because of that, the construction finance was pulled. So this project has had a torrid time, and some of the things that could never have been seen by any level of due diligence. But the problem is that the developer had so little capital in the deal, he ran away. And now us international investors are stuck with this $5 million hole in the ground. By the way, the investment committee, all of the people that believed so much in control, they've also run away. And so, us investors are now sit with a massive problem. And what we're trying to do is bring in a new developer so that they can take over the project. They've got the capital to capitalize the project. And we're negotiating an equity position so that we probably won't get all of our capital back, but we'll at least get some of our capital back in terms of that process. But this is a classic example of it's impossible to try and run a development from overseas. And the only way to succeed is with local investors, local partners, and local capital. Another good example, oh, sorry, this was the Kensington one still. Another thing that happened with investors here is they got allured. Me too, it's 28% return development. The problem is developments are the most risky things. There's so many things that are out of your control, economically, politically, socially, the banks, interest rates, the market, the economy, everything. And unfortunately, this one didn't go according to plan. And like I said to you, the problem is if we had Australian investors, if we had institutional investors, we would never have these problems. And that's why, now it's about getting the local, investors and developers on board to be able to find a solution. Another good example of this, once again, that same project committee, investment committee that kind of had this mindset of control, went over to America and they did all these medical deals. Now, medical, arguably was a very good investment, but then COVID came along and all of the elective surgeries stopped. So all of our tenants that owned all of these, rented all of these buildings, suddenly had no business. And there was one partner, a gentleman, a company called Richmond H, and they had a huge track record, 40 plus years, billions under management. So again, back to Diligence, so ticked all the boxes, but they broke the fundamental rule, okay, for two reasons. One is they put all the capital in and they controlled it. There was no local investors, no local American high net worth, sophisticated and institutional investors. It was all international capital. And secondly, they didn't diversify. All the money was with this Richmond H group across multiple deals. And Richmond H fell over, okay? And there's a whole debate around whether he did or didn't do fraud. It doesn't matter. The point being is that the deals have been repossessed by the bank and us investors are sitting here going, what just happened there? And it literally comes back to this old school mindset of trying to do everything, trying to control from a distance. It doesn't work. I'll give you an example of a deal that also didn't work, but using the new age way of doing it. Now, we've done 2 deals with Felman Equities. They've got over $100 million, worth of their own money invested. They've got 100 years of experience. They've survived 7 recessions. They've literally been in the market for 43 years. And they've got over $3 billion under management. Now, we got 2 deals with them, both which we did during COVID. And one of them was, is working fine. And it's because they fixed the mortgage for 7 years. And the other one, this one, Pinnacle Corporate Park, was what's called a value add project. And I actually just want to show you here quickly. So sorry, give me 2 seconds. I'll just open up the platform, the Wealth Migrate platform. So what's really interesting in a value add is that there's more risk. So their strategy here was to lease up the property, which they've done. They were at about an 80% occupancy, and they were going to lease up the property, and they've got it to over 90%. But they never foresaw the massive rise in interest rates no one around the world foresaw this, by the way, the massive rise in interest rates that's taken place in 2023, which has dramatically impacted the capital markets. And so because of that, they haven't been able to remortgage the property as they planned after 2 years. And so they had to go and do what's called a capital call. So if you look at these 2 different deals, this is why these risk categories become so critically important. Because if you take this first deal, First Central Towers, okay, this is a beautiful deal, but you can see it was a core plus. And the reason being is that they, from a risk perspective, they had fixed the interest rate. So there was a lot less execution risk in terms of this process. If I go back and I go back to this one here, then Pinnacle Corporate Park, this year was a value add. So these risk categories are really important for us as investors. And again, if we're diversifying, if we've got 10 different investments and 8 of them are working and 1 and 2 aren't, then that's fine, because that's a blended return. That's exactly how Ray Dalio teaches us. But you can see how this was a value add, and unfortunately, the capital markets turned against this project and the partner on the ground. But the difference is these guys had, millions and millions of dollars invested in the deal. And so rather than running away like Richmond H has run away on the ground in America, and the Orbis team and the project investment team and whatever have run away with the Kensington deal, in this deal, Felman have all of their family money in the deal. They've got $20 million invested in institutional capital from Americans. And so they came along, they said, look, we got a problem, but this is how we're going to fix the problem. And they provided solutions, and they're riding the storm, they're weathering the storm and going right through it. And so it's a classic example of what, the difference in mindset between this old school way of doing it and this new age way of doing it. And again, I've given you 3 projects that didn't work, but 2 of them are effectively falling over, and the capital we'd be lucky as investors not, to get any capital back. Whereas on the third one, because it's the new age partnership model, you've got local investors, the project is being looked after and recovered. The final thing I just wanted to say was, this was a deal that was done in Manhattan at the end of last year. And again, it's a classic example of doing it the new age way, because there was about $8 million that was raised in equity in this deal. And of that, the majority of the money came from local high net worth family office and sophisticated institutional investors in America. About $1.5 million came from a family office called Callio Private Equity, which has high net worths around the world. And we only participated about $500,000 into that raise. And it's a classic example of what I'm trying to share with you when I show you. So let me just get up the PowerPoint. When I show you this slide here, because there's a lot less risk. And if that project wasn't to go ahead, you've got those local investors, you've got institutions, you've got sophisticated investors. So it provides you with a lot more ability to be an armchair investor. You've got diversification, you've got less control, granted, but you've got a lot more safety with regards to the investment. And so I wanted to share with you some of the lessons I've learned. And in conclusion, I think that we can learn a lot from nature. The old school way of doing it, the control way of doing it, is trying to do everything on your own. A bird flying in a flock can fly 70% further than a bird, flying on its own. My philosophy is, why not follow the laws of nature? Why not embrace diversification and partnership and really use that new age model? And from my perspective, what I think is really, really important is, have we made mistakes in deals? Definitely. Do we make mistakes in all deals? Definitely not. About 80%, like I said to you. And when you do make a mistake, what becomes really, really important is that you learn from those mistakes. My biggest learning over the last 10 years is that this old school methodology of control versus this new age methodology of diversification and partnership is the number one principle upon which you need to succeed if you want to become an international investor. I hope that helped. I hope you enjoyed the lessons. I'm sorry for myself and for the investors that have lost capital in terms of mistakes that are made, but that is the essence of investing. You can do as much due diligence as you want. At the end of the day, sometimes things will not go according to plan. And that's why diversification is absolutely critical. Cheers.